Boa tarde, gente. É um prazer muito grande estar aqui. A gente vai dando sequência aqui no nosso movimento, né? Então, bem legal a gente poder estar aqui falando de novas economias e trazendo pessoas tão incríveis para compartilhar as jornadas delas, né? Agradecer o pessoal da coalizão que esteve aí com a gente agora e também a todo mundo que esteve nas atrações aí pela manhã, que também foram bem ricas, bem interessantes. E para dar sequência, a gente vai ter agora o Andres Roberts, ele é inglês e ele vai aqui compartilhar um pouco para a gente das perspectivas que ele tem visto dentro do trabalho com natureza. Eu vou mudar para o molde inglês para fazer essa conversa com ele. E quem precisar de interpretação, de intérprete, né? A gente está aqui com o Everton, que acredito que ele já esteja setado numa cabine, para ele fazer essa tradução para a gente. Boa tarde, bem-vindo, muito obrigada por estar fazendo essa transposição aqui para a gente. É bem importante a gente poder trazer para a nossa língua nativa. E acredito que os que estão aqui no Zoom com a gente, se apertarem o botão interpretação, vocês podem escolher o modo português e vocês vão escutar a gente com a dublagem do Everton, tá? E quem está no YouTube vai ouvir a gente já nativamente dublado, certo? E a gente vai fazer também uma gravação original aqui no Zoom em inglês para guardar para o futuro. E com isso eu vou mudar para inglês e a gente começa o nosso painel. So thank you all again for joining the session with us. We are very happy to start this movement regarding new economy here in the city of Brasilia and also connected with many partners all across the country. And Following our lineup for this event, we have today Andres Roberts, who is a great creator of the Bioleadership Project, and also, I can say, a good friend of mine. So it's very lovely to be here and joining this session with you, Andres. Welcome.
Thanks, Carol. It's very nice to be with you and see you. I'm sorry, eu falo muito pouco português. Então, Everton, obrigado. I have to tell you, my football team is Everton. So Everton, I'm so happy we're together, and we need a lot of Brazilian football luck for my football team. And I'm also very, very happy to be speaking about this topic. I think important things and stories are happening in the world, and we need new economic models that serve life. So it's good to be together.
Gorgeous. So thank you, Andres. I didn't know there was a team called Everton. So that's my great learning for today. I'll go after it. And it's really a great topic for us when we talk about football. And following my introductions for those who do not know Andres, he has founded the Bioleadership Project, which is a program that holds initiatives to connect nature with leaderships around the world. He's also the director of the Bioleadership Fellowship, which I'm very happy to be part of the faculty members who run this amazing program that invites people to work on their leadership skills guided by nature. We are going to our next cohort next year, 2024, and we already have like 110 people joined this journey in the fellowship. So really amazing opportunity for those who wants to bring in nature into their work or into their daily lives. And also he has been an advisor and guide pioneering the earth-centered business organizations around the world, such as Patagonia, Aviva, Investors, and the Philanthropy Lab as well. So Andres holds a great experience to guide people into nature and to have nature as a model for what we should do in our companies and also in our mentality. We had touched a little bit on nature as a guide this morning, Andres, with Anna, who brought us about the economic and how nature can be also this model. So we are very excited to hear from you and to hear how leadership can take part in nature and how nature can inspire new models and new business as well. And I'll give it back to you, and Andres will share with us a presentation, and after that, I think it's a good opportunity for us to share a little bit and enjoy a really good round of questions and take this opportunity to have your voice here with us, Andres. So, giving you the word so you can have the presentation.
Great, great. Thanks, Carol. It's very good to join you, everybody, and thank you again for making time for this conversation. Yeah, I mean, to say a little bit about the BioLeadership Project, we work with a narrative that the business as usual story of progress, like the business as usual story that has brought us to this point in history, you know, that is a model of progress, a model of development that maybe is 2-3 centuries old, is based on a set of principles that ultimately are extracting and destroying life, you know, and great, it's a set of principles that have helped a lot of good things happen. And economically, it's a set of principles that have brought a lot to human systems. But if we keep working with those principles, we will ultimately destroy not just Earth systems, but social systems as well. And with the BioLeadership Project, we're saying actually a new kind of progress, a new set of stories that work with life, that generate life, are growing in the world. And we want to be a network to connect those different stories. And I think those stories are happening in lots of different ways. They're very new. They still swim against the river of business as usual. So we want to try to help those stories connect and then support them and help them grow. And I'd love to say I've prepared 10 minutes of a talk, and then maybe we can make it a conversation together. So I'm just going to share some slides. Okay, so I mean, I guess I've already spoken to this, but if you look to the science and our generations, where we stand, we're at a point where we can't carry on in the same way. And we don't have an answer yet, but we need new forms of generative progress. We're taking and we're extracting from our, I mean, this is science now, you know, we're taking and from our physical systems, and that's unsustainable, and it will bring the whole system crashing down if we carry on. So we're looking for new forms of generative progress. Now, to say a little bit about my work, for more than 15 years, well, for 20 years, have worked on areas of social change, systems change, purpose-led business, sustainability. And 15 years ago, I actually started to do this, which is run leadership programs and development programs where I take people into nature. This is actually in the Spanish Pyrenees. Sometimes it can be a local park. You know, sometimes it can be looking out of the window. Nature is actually very close when we remember where nature is. And one of the things that we do is we help people to slow down, to leave the fast pace of work and of society behind, and to just make time to notice nature and to notice natural systems. And when we do it, on the one side, it's amazing for ourselves. You know, we feel more grounded, we feel more relaxed, we start to remember the important things in life. we get a better sense of perspective about our problems, we become more creative. So at the individual level, it's an amazing thing to do. What we also start to see, and I've seen this through my work for a long time, is that we start to see that human systems, our businesses, our communities, our government systems, they work very differently to how a healthy natural system works. Like, so society is very, very different to how healthy nature works. And that's been a huge question for me for 15 years. And all of the work that Carol described is about this. It's saying, how can we bring the principles of nature and how do we bring the principles of healthy living systems into our social systems, whether it's a business or a community or a government, and so on and so on. So I'd love to talk a little bit about that. So I'm really interested in what is the dominant story, what is business as usual based on, and this idea that it's based on a set of principles that they don't work anymore. They're not good anymore for us to sustain our system. So the first principle of the dominant system, the dominant mindset of progress, is rooted on this principle of maximization. We have this story that make it bigger, make it faster, more is good and it's successful. And still today, if we pick up a newspaper, gross domestic product, profitability is still the measure of, is it good or is it bad? But then if you look at this, I know there is a lot of information on this slide. Don't worry, it's not about the detail. I just want to show you a pattern. But this is from an initiative called the Great Acceleration Project. And it looks at how quickly things have accelerated over the last 200 years. So every one of these charts has time on the bottom of the table. It starts in the year 1750 and it runs to the year 2010. And this little red blur, I guess you probably can't see the detail, but this figure in red is the year 1950. Everything on the left-hand side here is a human trend. It's human behavior. So we have the world population, we have the production of paper, we have the construction of dams. And what's interesting to me is that you can see in our lifetimes from the year 1950, everything begins to grow almost exponentially. It goes faster and faster and faster and faster. Okay, that's a pattern. We can say that's the pattern. But then when you look at our Earth systems, and it's not just carbon in the atmosphere related to climate change, it's, acidification of the oceans, it's the loss of tropical rainforests, is nitrogen in the coast. It's a similar pattern. It's a similar pattern. So it's very, very interesting to me to say, wow, our measure of success is still do more and go faster, but that has a direct effect, obviously, on our Earth systems. And something, if you've already looked at donut economics today, you know that actually there are planetary boundaries around these systems and we can't keep going fast. That mode is just not, we're just going to crash. In nature, if any part of the system maximizes, if any one part of a system in nature maximizes, it will bring the system crashing down. So that's the pattern that we're in right now. And that's the outcome that we are going off, as almost like the edge of a cliff, the edge of a mountain. So a second aspect of the dominant way of seeing the world, the dominant principle of business as usual, is this idea that we're attached to control. The dominant mindset is attached to control. What I mean by that is that we see the world as a resource. We see nature as a resource. We see humans as resources in organizations. We can measure them because we become very intelligent. And because we can measure them, we think we have power over them. And we can organize them in a mechanical way. But interestingly, in English, at least, there is an acronym which is called VUCA, VUCA, and it stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. This comes from the USA military to describe environments that are very difficult to navigate. And it speaks very much for the world that we're in at the moment. So volatile, of course, means, wow, change is happening more and more quickly, and it's more difficult to predict. Uncertain means we can't see the patterns anymore. You know, it's very difficult to know what's going to happen next year or in 2 years' time. Complex means we can't work it out with rational thinking. You know, we need new ways to understand, you know, what's happening in the environment. And ambiguous, of course, means we can't say whether it's green or red or black or white or big and small. It's all kinds of things at the same time. And interestingly, a worldview of control, the idea that we have control, doesn't work in a VUCA world. This is a quote that I have. Forgive me that it's in English, but it was from an interview with somebody very, very senior in the financial system here in the United Kingdom. And I was asking them questions about a responsible financial system. And this person said to me, I'm supposed to have influence, but I feel completely powerless. And it says something about this idea that we have control in a mechanistic way doesn't work anymore when the world is complex. And then the other thing that I wanted to say is that we perhaps in this business as usual, the dominant mindset is one where we feel a sense of disconnection. Like we feel we're disconnected from each other. We definitely feel like we're disconnected from wider systems, and we're disconnected from nature. But we know that other traditions and other cultures, and now we know through quantum physics, that actually the nature of things is that they're very, very much interconnected. So I wanted to speak to those three principles of maximization, control, and disconnection, to say nature doesn't work like that. Like healthy living systems don't work like this. And so to begin with, nature works not through maximization, but through optimization. So if you think about it, a healthy ecosystem, all of the different parts of the ecosystem are in constant competition, but it's a kind of competition that keeps all of those parts in a healthy shape. So nature is very, very violent. We know that, you know, but somehow all of the parts are keeping themselves in a healthy shape so that the whole of the system can stay healthy. It's a very interesting principle of healthy systems. And then instead of hierarchies and instead of control, nature, of course, works through relationships and through webs of exchange, of interaction, and through cycles, you know. And we know this from the seasons, when we see that there is spring when things begin, and there is summer when they grow, and there is autumn and winter when things are quiet, and then spring begins again. Things don't grow in straight lines forever in nature. And things are in a constant exchange of giving and taking and dying and rebirth. And then instead of a sense of separation, all aspects of nature, all aspects of an ecosystem are constantly interconnected. And that's how they help each other stay healthy. So there's, again, forgive me that this is in English, it would be lovely to put it in Portuguese, but this is the question that we hold in terms of development. Like, this is the question that we hold in progress. Are we at a moment in time when the set of principles are on the left-hand side describe the dominant paradigm of progress, maybe the dominant paradigm of economics? And can we somehow start to bring in the principles of healthy living systems from the right-hand side into how we work, so that we move from maximization to optimization and a balanced way of seeing? You know, we move away from top-down control to the idea of living as of living systems and networks and self-organization, decentralized self-organization. We move away from linear thinking and linear processes to circular. We move away from short-term gains and short-term profits to measures that indicate the long-term health of a system. We move away from extractive and taking to regenerating, like the seasons, giving back and composting and giving back. And maybe we move away from seeing the world as disconnected to seeing the world as a whole. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there. Yeah, I'll stop there. Lovely to. I hope this resonates, and there's lots behind it. But Carol, I'll stop there, and nice to have a chat.
Wow, amazing, Andres. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think I have seen this presentation quite a few times, and it always moves me the way to bring in nature as as this model. And I'd like to invite people in Zoom, whether they have questions, you can just pop up in the chat and add it in Portuguese or in English, whatever you feel comfortable doing. And at the same time, for people in YouTube to do the same. The idea for us now is to open up a conversation on how to envision nature into our business, into our daily lives. And I'd like to start, Andres, asking you to share a little bit on how do you see the challenges in moving from this maximization and this left side processes that you were sharing in your slide to the other side when we work on a personal level. So what challenges are you seeing happening around you that you can share with us who I believe most of us who are here are working in sustainability field, and we face every day this challenge of doing something different. So how do you vision this moving in ourselves as in our hearts?
Well, amazing question, yeah. Oh yeah, where to start with it? So it's interesting. I mean, Carol, we've known each other probably 7 years, 6, 7 years now. And we met when I was helping with a program in Brazil. And when we set up the BioLeadership Project, and we said we need a new form of leadership that works with nature, I thought, hey, let's do it because we think it's needed, and let's do it because we want to try to validate that the idea of leadership with nature is a thing we should do. Now, 6, 7 years later, it feels like there are hundreds or thousands of people around the world doing it. It was trying to be born already, and of course, it's not a new thing. If we look to indigenous traditions, people have worked with nature in a way that sustains the system and sustains people in different ways for a long time. But what we're trying to do across the world really is say, yeah, we can do this. We can do this in a modern way, and we can do it in the context of a dominant system that's very powerful. It's very, very difficult to step outside of it. So there are a lot of challenges. And I suppose, what am I seeing? I'm seeing that it helps to be honest about the situation that we're in. I think there's a lot of power in saying, here's the reality of the situation that we're in. And I'm seeing that there's a lot of power in saying, I don't have the solution yet, but I'm going to have a go. And we were speaking before, Carol, about Patagonia, the clothing company. And we work with Patagonia here in Europe and in the European teams. And one of the things that I really appreciate about Patagonia is what I call their framing. I don't know if they do it intentionally, but what they say is, you know what, we're not a sustainable business. Maybe a sustainable business doesn't exist yet, but we're trying to be a responsible business, you know. And so I think that's a massive space when we're just honest about the state we're in, and we're honest about what's needed in the world, and then say, we don't have the answer yet, but we're going to give it a go. We're going to give it a go. And I think we've seen this through our fellowship, the BioLeadership Fellowship that you spoke to. Nobody can do it alone. Like, nobody can change the system alone. Nobody can make their business, transform their business alone. We have to somehow find different ways of collaborating with each other, collaborating with networks that are trying, and then all of a sudden we start to make little changes in systems together. I mean, that's the first thing that comes to mind. Maybe something else that's a bit more, because I heard the question also at a very inner development way. I find myself saying, when we take the time to listen to nature in a different way, when we really make the time, maybe it's only an hour, but when we really look, forget the busy thinking, forget the day-to-day thinking, and really notice how life moves, how life grows, how nature is, it teaches us something very different. And I say a new kind of knowledge emerges. And actually, that's a first step that we can all try to do. Just make the time to listen in a different way.
Mm-hmm. I see a few questions popping up, Andres, while we were starting this conversation. And while listening, like being honest about the stage we are and what is happening around us. And it kind of feels uncomfortable to understand that this time we don't have the right answer, the proper answer that needs to be followed, but we need to work on this uncomfortable moment where the VUCA world, or as Sueli shared here in the chat, the bunny world as well, we are facing, and how to handle this uncomfortable moment. Maybe I can bring it in. We have 3 questions. So the first one is from Daniel. He's sharing that somehow we separated ourselves from the archetypes of nature. Somehow we behave as we don't belong. So in this sense, how do you envision we can reconnect again within nature and with those natural laws that affect us as well?
Very cool. I mean, I want to answer that in two levels. One is, I think we can create more experiences where we go into nature and listen, as I say. I mean, I think in education and in businesses, and sometimes it's so simple. You know, sometimes all I do with a leadership team or with a team in an organization is go for a walk and then light a fire and sit around the fire, and the quality of the conversation changes, you know. And wow, if we create a program where we put in some innovation questions and we take the time to again go for walks, do movement in different ways, open up our awareness to look at nature in a different way, a different quality of awareness comes up, and a different quality of consciousness comes up. I really believe that. I hope it doesn't sound too wacky. It's very simple, but it happens. You know, it really happens. So a quick way to answer that is, let's really practice it. Let's go into nature. What I think becomes very interesting beneath that is that we do live in a culture that doesn't value that. You know, we live in a culture where we're supposed to be busy and the intellect is supposed to be so important, and we don't make the time, as you said, Carol, we maybe are even fearful of saying that we don't have the answer. We feel we have to be experts. And I have a big thing about MBAs, like business education, and the business development. The point I want to make is, how do we create a culture where we value different forms of knowledge? And with the BioLeadership Project, and this is working with people in Patagonia, the financial system, with SDGs. I think more people now are at a point of saying, we can't just think our way out of this. Like we need something different. There's an amazing guy called Brian Arthur who set up the Santa Fe Institute for Complexity. And he says, when a problem is trivial, logic is fine. But when a problem is complex, we need something else. And he goes into nature for a week at a time and just waits and waits and waits and waits. And then something somehow helps him see the world in a different way. And this is a Nobel nominated physicist. He's like, his brain, he can't work it out by thinking alone. So what am I saying? I'm saying we need new forms of knowledge. We need new ways of seeing the world. And we need to create cultures where thinking, yes, it's important, but maybe it's only the third part. Like in the BioLeadership Project, we talk about 3 forms of knowledge. The first third is thinking. The second third is being. What does the world need in the world today? What does our world need in terms of leadership qualities? It needs us to know what resilience is and how to build resilience. It needs us to be able to see the whole systems. Like, it needs us to have systemic awareness. It needs us to be adaptable and to change and to navigate change. It needs us to understand connection and interconnection. And I would say it needs us to be able to be compassionate and loving, to nurture new systems in a way that we care. And you can't teach that intellectually. You can't learn those skills by thinking alone. You develop them by creating experiences where we feel them in different ways. So there's intellect, there's ways of being, and then the last form of knowledge is about connecting, like being able to see each other as collective movements, exchanging knowledge, exchanging culture, exchanging information, so that we can move as whole systems. And nature teaches us those things. Sorry, I'm answering this question in a very long way. But
You're doing just perfectly, Andres. Just move on.
but that way, I can't remember who asked the question, but it's like, we can do it. We can go out into nature. We can bring our questions into nature. But I think we can also create cultures where we value those different ways of knowing. Yeah, I'll stop there.
That was amazing. Thank you. And thank you, Daniel, for the question. And I'll move to Sueli question. She talks about VUCA and also the bunny, which is brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible. And she's asking if you consider we are in a new level, like beyond VUCA and beyond bunny world today.
I hadn't looked at Bani. I didn't know it, but those words mean a lot, and they feel a lot. And I mean, my immediate response is probably all of those words describe how we can feel in the world. I think the word anxiety clearly is something that's more prominent now. If I look at those words again. And brittle as well. It does feel to me like, and who am I? And I'm not an expert enough to be able to say it, and I would be going against what I'm proposing to say I have an answer. But it does feel like our systems are very, very fragile and very brittle. And I do think we live in a world where there is a greater sense of anxiety, even when it's not spoken. And it's very difficult to describe. So I agree. I agree that level is in our systems and in how we, even just young people. I was speaking to somebody who works at a university here in the UK, And she said they have a team that looks after student well-being, and that's now 50 people in the team. And when I was a student, I was like, we didn't talk about mental health, which is not a great thing, but I wouldn't have known where to go. And we probably had like a welfare officer or something. And the reality is, if you're 19 now at a university, there is a team of 50 people prepared for your anxiety. And I think we have that in all of our systems. So it brings me back to those qualities that I said. What do we need as qualities really in our economic systems, in our leadership systems? Resilience, adaptability, connection, systemic awareness, and love. And I would add a feeling of belonging. In nature is an incredible guide at helping us feel like we belong to something special. And I always feel so assured by, wow, I'm part of something amazing. Okay, things are hard, but they're also very cool. Yeah.
Great. Also, thank you, Suri, for bringing this. And we have Marina. Marina said she's happy to see you again.
Hey, Marina, nice to hear from
Hey,
you.
Marina.
Mm-hmm.
And she's bringing a very good question about profit. So, what nature can teach us about profit, and how do we know when profit is disturbing a system balance? That's a very good one.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, unfortunately, I think we have measures to show the general measure of profit is behind the erosion of our systems. Like the great acceleration shows that. I think that's why I think it's such a good slide. It shows when you have an economic model that's only about growth, when you have profit measures that are only about growth, then we can see we have that evidence that it's disturbing the system's balance already. So it starts with the second of those 2 points. But I think we have to be obviously realistic, and I think there is I really like being entrepreneurially minded. I think there's something I like the creativity that comes in producing things, in making things, in creating something that people value. And I'm actually not fully personally into, for example, degrowth alone. I do think we have to stop profit as the sole measure. And I think nature might show us that profit or growth happens in cycles, and that death is part of nature, and autumn and winter are part of nature. And I feel like, as I said before, also there are very different forms of exchange that happen in a healthy natural system. So we're nowhere near close to it yet, but I do think nature would work with profit in a way where it's limited in how it grows, and then it feeds back into the cycles of where it comes from. And it's distributed into a system in a very different way. But I'm excited that, if you combine circularity with profit, things like that, if you put profit in through the lens of the donut, like in donut economics, we can still be creative, we can still produce, we can be regenerative, but in a way that gives back to the system. And I think, regenerative business, that's a guiding star for so many people. No, how do we get to a point where through the process of being generative and still profitable, we replenish, we give back. There's a business called Guajaki, and I'm sure they have operations in Brazil. It's yerba mate tea. I love what they're doing. They're so regenerative. And I would add Patagonia, say we're not regenerative yet. We're trying regenerative things. We're not there yet. So nobody's there yet, but we're trying, we're trying, we're trying. I hope that makes some sense.
It totally does. And also makes me think, Andres, how it is important to give meaning to things. We think about exchanging things all the time, like replacing things. And maybe it's more like how can we add meaning to it? How can we deeply connect with the words and the intentions we are having behind? So yeah, that can be profit, but what's my intentions behind it? How where my business is grounded? And you mentioned it, Koyaki, you mentioned it, also Patagonia. And is there any other space where you find leaders being courageous to connect with deep questions and opening those conversations within the organizations as well? And how that happens? How, for those who have never been in a session to reconnect with nature, who, for those who are listening to it for the first time, how how that is led in an organization?
Well, great question. Yeah. One thing you just made me think in terms of those alternative models and where profit goes. Also, I think seeing profit through service rather than material goods is a thing that came to mind. Like it, I don't know if I'm ever going to get there in my life, but every now and again I play with this idea of what if I only had 100 objects in my life, and what if I had to have those 100 objects for the rest of my life, and they would be the most beautiful objects. What if I had just one bicycle and I had to have it for the rest of my life, and one knife in the kitchen and one bed. And then what would happen is that every couple of years, each of those things I'd take to an artisan or a designer, and they would help me keep it really beautiful or maybe repaint it and so on and so on. And that kind of economic flow, I think, is so exciting that it would become much more about beauty and quality and service and artisanship. So anyway, that's a small point that maybe I could have related to the profit point. I mean, coming back to the story of where people are at with businesses. Okay. I mean, this is a bit personal, or it's only my viewpoint. So I don't want to say this is right or wrong. Where I'm putting energy, and whereas the BioLeadership Project we're putting energy is saying, B Corp, Sistema B, all of a sudden is not enough. I mean, I want to say that it's good, it's helped us, but it's actually not enough. Because if every business in the world got to Sistema B, a B Corp, we would still be unsustainable. So I'm really interested in what's the space that goes from more than Sistema B to regenerative. And that's what I think a lot of us are exploring, how to bring, like, that for me is the how do we create earth-centered regenerative forms of being. And so to answer your question, how do we do it? Let me share. I'm going to share one slide, which is the last slide I wanted to share, if it's okay. This really helps me, this slide, because I don't think anybody is doing it, but I think we're seeing different kinds of story that show that they're doing part of this. So if the question is, how do we develop nature-centered, life-centered organizations? How do we learn from it? So I think there are 5 kinds of story. The first kind of story is that we can change what we class as the purpose and how we measure purpose and progress in a system. For example, in Bhutan, we know that the measure of the government is gross national happiness, right? So we can change what we measure, and then that changes the system. That's number one. And Carol and I, just before we started this conversation, we were talking about beautiful KPIs. What happens if you change the KPIs? You change what the measure. What happens if the measure of progress is quality of relationships or quality of life, not just profit? That's number one. The second kind of story is that we can change our organizational forms so that they work more like nature. And like I think there's something really interesting in saying, okay, what are the organizations that move away from hierarchy and centralized power and start to work more like genuine localized systems? And I think the work of Frederic Laloux, if it hasn't come up, and reinventing organizations and the idea of teal organizations is really interesting. Organizations that work like living systems are in this space. Then I think there are stories that are about how do we work as ecosystems inspired by nature. We let go of the idea of working in tunnels or silos. Carol mentioned this idea of, well, we're working on a project called the Philanthropy Lab. And the Philanthropy Lab is about bringing funders, philanthropists together to work more systemically together. And interestingly, the theme of the Philanthropy Lab is how do we help economies to be in service to life? Like how do we support economies to serve life, to serve nature? And the idea is that any one of those philanthropists could have been funding things by themselves, but everything would have been in a silo, separate. So instead, we've created this thing where they can work as an ecosystem, where we ask big questions and we help them work across their silos. And then we're starting to see stories of regeneration, like Guajaki, like, wow, we think we can give back, we can replenish. And then I think we're starting to see organizations where the culture is, hey, you know what? Let's work like we're part of life. Not like we own nature, but that we are part of nature. And you get a different feeling culturally. So not everybody is nobody's doing all of those things. But I think some people are having a really good go at one or two or maybe three of them. And it goes to show we can take one of those things and just try it and just give it a go. And then things change around that. So I don't know, Carol, that was my answer to that one.
Wow. Well, and I hope people have printed that screen with those 5 topics you brought, Andres, because they are really a good guidance on how to envision nature in their organizations and projects as well. So yeah, thank you for this. And I think I have my final question. And then I think very in the atmosphere of nature, maybe we can end, Andres, with for meditation, just like we do the bio-leadership all the time. So instead of being the beginning, maybe the end, if that's a good invitation for you, that would be lovely. So before that, I'd like to bring Ana Cristina question, which is, what is the importance of the relationship of not loyalty the right word, but like trusting worth in spaces of work. So how to bring a trustful space for organizations connecting with nature.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's huge, isn't it? Sometimes I feel like my work isn't about sustainability, but it's about collective consciousness. And sometimes I feel like I'm not fighting for a more sustainable future. Sometimes I think I'm fighting for can we somehow connect as human systems, as people, in a way where we really listen to each other and we really see the whole. And I think some of this relates back to what we were saying, that I don't know if this becomes a technical thing that's in the head, if it becomes about, you know, how can our systems be technically sustainable? I don't know if that's the challenge. Can it be about, can we find a way of thinking and acting and being collectively so that we protect all of life? You know, that it is a miracle. It is, I believe, to be on a planet like this, to have our senses, to be able to experience it. We don't know if that exists anywhere else in the universe, if it's ever existed across 13 billion years of the universe. And then it took, you know, 3.6 billion years in our planet to get to where we are. Wow. How do we make spaces to see that, you know, and to care for it? We're losing so much of how life has become so beautiful. So how do we make spaces to grow, and being able to create spaces of trust, and a big word for me is inquiry. How do we make spaces to inquire together? Because when we don't have the answer, and when we have to let go a little bit of being an expert, because I don't believe anyone has a perfect answer about what we should do. We have to ask each other questions, and we have to be vulnerable, and we have to help each other out, and that's where I think trust and making trusting conditions and cultures is so important.
Wow, wow, wow. That was a good answer. Or maybe there's a good path for a following answer in the future, right? Since we're talking about unlearning and opening up spaces, that feels very beautiful. Andres, thank you so much for open space on your tight agenda to have this conversation with us. You're really a person who speaks from the heart, and every time we have conversations, I appreciate how I left with my heart and body really easy and calm. It's a very similar connection I have when I'm with nature. So I think just talking about nature brings in how we should be and how our body needs to slow down and open to deeper connection. And if you like to, I'd like to invite you to start a small meditation with us to end this moment. And for those who are listening to Anders for the first time, he's in front of the Bio Leadership Project, in which which I'm part of the faculty, member of the fellowship, and we often do those meditations to ground ourselves again and connect. We have a panel just right after Andres. So if you're into gift us Andres this moment so we can ground and open our senses for our next panel, that will be lovely.
Great. Thanks, Carol. So yeah, we've got a few minutes. I mean, I've really enjoyed hearing the questions. I hope they've been relevant and helpful. And I want to say thanks again to Everton and Carol. It's always a joy to be together. So thank you. I would also say the next cohort of our BioLeadership Fellowship starts in February, folks. And it's a community where we bring these questions, we work together, we help each other learn and unlearn. So we would love to see more fellows. We have some fellows in Brazil. And if anybody would like to find out more, please get in touch. Great. Well, why don't we take a few minutes, just 2 or 3 minutes to, if you feel comfortable, you can close the eyes. We're off screen, so you can feel nice and safe. And for a moment, maybe you can let your legs feel heavy in the seat. And maybe you can feel the soles of your feet against the earth. Even if you have shoes on, you might feel a sense of connection to the ground, and beneath the ground, the soil. And for a moment, maybe see if you can bring a feeling of lightness or easiness to the crown of the head and the forehead and the temples, the ears and the eyes. And for a moment, perhaps bringing some softness to the neck and the shoulders. Arms. And in this silence for a moment, maybe connecting to your breath, observing the breath as it comes into the body, observing the breath as it leaves the body. And maybe you can enjoy for a short moment letting go of any thoughts, letting go of any words, any ideas, just enjoying the breath as it comes into the body and out of the body. And maybe for a moment you can bring your awareness to your own heart space, the place where you feel joy, kindness, friendship, love. And you might feel a tingle or a warm feeling around the heart. And maybe for a short moment, you can bring a feeling of something that you would love to help grow, or a feeling about the reason that brought you here to this space. And lastly, maybe you can bring a feeling uh, for a place that you love in nature into your heart. A beautiful place that you go to, or a view from a window, maybe the land beneath your feet. Taking a moment to acknowledge nature that is important to you, a place in nature that you love. Acknowledging nature together in this moment. Maybe enjoying 2 big breaths. Breathing out, breathing in, and out again. Maybe a last third breath, a big breath in, out, and bringing some movement into the arms and the shoulders if you were still. And maybe rubbing the eyes. And we'll come back on screen. Great. And, Carol, thank you again.
Thank you, my dear. It feels refreshing, and I hope you all enjoyed it, this conversation. And thanks again. Andres, and thanks Everton for opening this conversation in Portuguese as well. And with much love in my heart, I hand over now to Daniel to move on with the event. So thank you, my
Oh,
friend Andres.
bye, folks. Have a
And
great afternoon.
bye.
Thank you,
Vou
Andres.
mudar para o português agora. Passando para você, Daniel, para dar a sequência. E vi aqui Mel Bivar, quer entrar em contato, eu vou passar alguns links para você já já também, que eu tenho contato.
Obrigado, Carol.
Obrigada.
Thank you, Andres. Thank you, Halt.